Hi, grade 5. Welcome back to another reading of Lemony Snicket's File Under 13 Suspicious Incidents. We are going to read Chapter 4 today. If you'd like to see the solution for Chapter 3, just go to where the Chapter 3 quiz was posted and check out the comments, and I will write it in the comments for you. But today we are reading Chapter 4, which is called Walkie Talkie. I was at the counter at Hungry's, finishing a lunch Jake Hicks had been kind enough to fix for me. It was a massive spaghetti tossed together with some spinach, a little cheese, and a chopped up onion burnt almost to a crisp, with a perfect fried egg on top. He called it a name I couldn't remember, something he'd learned from an unemployed gondolier who had passed through town. I called it almost perfect. It would have been more than almost perfect had there been better company at the counter. On one side was a lean man in a green suit and a hat with a feather on it, but he wasn't who the problem was. Stu Mitchum was on the other side. Think of something noble and true, like a librarian or a good crisp apple or a sweater that doesn't itch, and then think of the opposite. That's Stu. He was a rat and a nuisance and many other troublesome words I knew, the sort of person who might dump a whole shaker on your head if you asked him to pass the salt. A little salt on my egg would have been good, but I didn't risk it. Stu was having lunch too, 3 chocolate muffins at full price, and he was trying to bargain his way to a 4th. No way, Fray Ray, Hicks said to Stu, using one of his favorite expressions. I'm cutting you off. 3 chocolate muffins are your limit. Be a sport, Jake, Stu said in a whiny tone that never gets anyone to be a sport. I don't like sports except croquet and water polo, Jake said, and I don't like you except you're a paying customer. You don't have enough money for a 4th muffin, and if you eat any more sugar, you'll be so shaky you'll drop crumbs on my nice clean floor. Imagine telling somebody that's your customer. I don't like you, but you pay me, so okay. Sorry, I digress. I'll pay you double tomorrow. You can pay me triple yesterday. The answer is no. I could call the cops on you. Jake sighed and pointed at Stu. First of all, call them your parents, because that's who the only cops are in Stained by the Sea. And secondly, denying you a 4th muffin isn't a crime. I'd call it a mercy. Stu's face snarled up like elevator doors had closed on it. Then maybe I won't pay for the first 3, he said. You already did. Well, maybe I won't leave a tip. Think it over while I use the can. With that rude phrase I've never liked, Stu slid off the stool and clattered away to the door-marked restrooms, and the man in the green suit frowned after him. What was that all about? He asked. That's about 4.5 feet tall and about as nice as a wasp stuck indoors, Hicks told him. More coffee? No, thank you, the man said, and left a few bills on the counter. Keep the change and keep out of trouble. I should be back in town next month. He nodded at both of us, the feather on his hat nodding too, and off he went. Jake fed the money to the cash register and wiped the counter clean. Been meaning to tell you, Snicket, Jake said. I'm trying one of those books you recommended about the clever kid in Utah. Don't squawk, but so far I'm not liking it much. My mouth was full of crunchy onion, but Hicks frowned at me. I said don't squawk, he said. I didn't squawk, I told him after I'd swallowed. Someone squawked, I heard it, he said, and then I heard it too. For a minute I thought there was a radio in my shoe, as had once been required as part of my education. But the squawking sound came from the floor, and it was followed by a cry for help. What was that? Jake asked. Help! Help! The voice called again, and in moments I was crouching on the floor next to the counter. As Jake had mentioned, it was a nice clean floor, so it was easy to find what I was looking for. The squawking object was a small and black with an on-off switch, a round speaker, a red button marked top, and a piece of tape with more letters I couldn't make sense of. Help! Help! The object said again. It's a walkie-talkie, I said, and pressed the red button. Lemony Snicket here. Can I be of assistance? Over. I remembered to say over, a word which, when spoken on a walkie-talkie, means I'm done talking and it's your turn. A code that the person on the matching walkie-talkie sounded too panicked to remember. Help, it said, so crackly I could not even tell if the voice belonged to a man or a woman. Where's George? George, help me! Jake looked at the walkie-talkie and then at the door. My customer, he said. He must have dropped it. Is his name George? I don't know, Jake said. I just know him as the guy who comes into town once a month for Steak Freaked. Can you hear me? The voice asked, and I pressed the red button again. I can hear you, I said, and headed toward the door. Jake took off his apron and followed. Steak frite is nothing more than a steak with french fries, but it's delicious if it's done well. I tried to be good at my job, too. What is the nature of your emergency? Over? I'm trapped, over, said the voice. I need George to rescue me, over. Our enemies have captured me. There was a moment of staticky silence from the walkie-talkie as Jake and I stepped outside. Down the block, I saw just a glimpse of a figure turning the corner. Too quick for me to see if it was the man in the green suit, but Jake and I looked at each other and headed in that direction. George, said the walkie-talkie. We're trying to find him for you, I said. Over. Help me, over, help me. Tell me more about your situation, over, I said, halfway down the block. There was another silence from the walkie-talkie, and I looked at the piece of tape and the letters printed there. OFF-SBTS-USE. It was no word I'd ever heard of. The closest I could think of was obtuse, which could refer to a large angle or a dim-witted person, but obtuse didn't have dashes in the middle. Not many words or phrases did, but maybe in a dashy town like Stained by the Sea, it was more common. Off something, I thought. Perhaps it was just instructions to turn off the walkie-talkie. George and I, said the crackly voice, are spies and I've been captured. Is George wearing a green suit? I asked, just as we reached the corner. How do I know? The voice asked. I'm miles away. The voice started to say something else, but then through the speaker I could hear a loud whoosh that interrupted. The noise reminded me of something I'd heard before, but I couldn't think what. What's happening? I asked. Over. There was a brief pause, and then the voice grew louder and more worried. It's a flood, it cried. They're flooding the room. George, Jake called as we rounded the corner, but there was no one but us on the sidewalk. I was thinking of the noise, like a waterfall, but indoors. Help, the voice said again, and out of the doorway stepped the man in the green suit. What's going on? He asked. I heard shouting just as I was entering my condominium. Are you George? I asked him. No, the man said. My name's Leroy. Jake's face fell. Are you sure you ain't George? Are you obtuse? The man said. I'm quite sure of my name, thank you very much. Help! The voice cried from the walkie-talkie. Over! Find George! We're sorry to have bothered you, sir, I said, and led Jake back the way we had come. The man disappeared from the street, and I pressed the button and said, We're trying to find George. Is there anything else you can tell us about him? Over. He's a spy like I am, the voice said after a short pause. He might be in disguise because of being a spy. Jake and I looked at each other and then began to walk back toward Hungry's. I scanned the block and wondered if George could disguise himself as a streetlight or the rind of a melon someone had tossed into the gutter. Drain leads to sea, it said on the curb, and even though the sea was gone, I looked at the printing carefully. Does this label mean anything to you? I asked Jake, showing him the tape. Use, George tried to say out loud, but his mouth stumbled in the middle. Maybe it's initials. Help, help, the voice said, even more garbled than before. I hoped the spy wasn't starting to drown. I had a list of ways I would prefer to die. Drowning was toward the bottom of the list. My top choice was never. At the door to Hungry's, we stopped again, looking every which way. We couldn't know who we were looking for, but it didn't matter. With no one on the streets, there was no one to find. How many customers have you had today? I asked Jake. Not very many, he said, and none of them look like spies. Good spies don't look like spies, I said, and the walkie-talkie crackled in my hand again. Don't just hang around the door, the muffled voice said. Help me, over. I turned the walkie-talkie off and pushed open the door to the diner. Stu Mitchum was behind the counter with his mouth full of muffin, number 4. You scoundrel, Jake said, gasping behind me. You swindler, you rake, you snake in the grass. Snake in the grass is a phrase for a person without scruples, such as a boy who would pretend to be a person in danger just to steal a muffin. But it wasn't the phrase I was thinking of. I suddenly knew what use meant. I'd learned something. 2 things, really, if you included the whoosh sound. I'd already known that Stu was a scoundrel, a swindler, a rake, and a snake in the grass. But now I knew where he got the 2 walkie-talkies, the one behind his back and the one in my hands. And at least I'd learned that this snake in the grass was good about washing his hands. So, the conclusion of walkie-talkie. I'll give you a hint. It's the conclusion of walkie-talkie is called Through the Window. So maybe that can be part of when you answer for what you think happened. This is a great opportunity to kind of use your reading and your imagination, your thought juices to come up with some really good ideas about what exactly the conclusion of this story is going to be. I mean, I think they figured out who was on the end of the walkie-talkie, and I think that they probably figured out that Stu did the whole thing as a trick just so he could sneak another muffin. But the question is, what are they going to do about it? How did they figure it out? Lemony Snicket figures things out so easily. It's kind of amazing. So I hope you enjoyed that. As I said earlier today in our meet, I think what I will be doing is posting read-alouds on Tuesdays and Thursdays and then doing meets on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So for now, I will see you soon and have an amazing long weekend.